We're so glad to have all of you joining us live. And then those of you that are catching this on YouTube or on our sexandrelationshiphealing.com site, all of the previously recorded webinars are posted there under the resource tab. I am going to be making a little video on navigating the website, so stay tuned. I haven't had time yet, but it's on my list. So there will be opportunities to kind of go, here's how you navigate around on each of the sites. But there's great resources on both of them. I never do this. There's great resources on both of them. So where I'm doing both at the same time. So we're going to get started. Dr. Rob, our first question, I will put in the answered so you can see it. Could you talk about the spectrum of sexual addiction? My husband acted out with massages, prostitutes, and dating apps over the span of our 12-year marriage, but it wasn't a constant thing. In other words, he would go a year at a time with no acting out. Is this still considered a sexual addiction, and is treatment different for someone who doesn't have the constant, continuous compulsion to act out?
Well, that's a hard question to answer. Maybe because you know what the answer might be, Tammy, but to you, so I would just really think about it this way. People who struggle with secretive sexual behaviors, whether it's massage parlors or porn or, whatever that is, and we don't always know exactly what they're doing. I promise you, we can hide things pretty well. I don't really always believe them when they say, oh, they've been through a whole run of acting out and then it stopped and then it started again. What I mostly encounter is men who have, or women who told their spouse as much as their spouse already knows, like, oh yeah, you knew I was doing this till April, but that was it. I stopped, or I started going to 12 steps and I stopped. And then a year and a half later, you caught me and oh my goodness, but I just started. And so there's often these gaps where someone will say, oh, it stopped that entire time. And if someone were in treatment, like the guys who are there right now, I would probably doubt that. And as a spouse, I would absolutely want to believe that were true. And in your case, I hope it is. There are people who have sort of problematic sexual behavior that shows up when they are dealing with extreme stress or anxiety, like someone dies or something like that, or they have a breakup. But I have not seen people in extreme. So when you talk about a spectrum, what I think about is it 2 nights a week or 10 nights a week? There aren't 10 nights a week.
10 nights a week, I was going to
say. Is it twice a day or every single day, or is there escalation in the behavior? They started here and they ended up there. So when I think of, what's the word you had, of spectrum, I think of spectrum of type of behavior. I do think of a spectrum of frequency of behavior, but I'm not thinking like there's going to be a year and a half in between. So that would not sound like, in fact, I wouldn't really think that person was a sex addict, but I think more likely they're lying. Tammy?
I wonder what else he was doing, because this makes me go, okay, I didn't do those things, but was he drinking or using drugs? Was he eating a lot of food, or, really focused on working out? I mean, to me, it's like, okay, I'm not doing those things for a while. And I'm kind of going like, well, were you watching porn instead? Because so it's like, what was he substituting is my wondering is, what else was he doing? Because this to me is like, that's a fair amount of stuff. And so I'd be curious about that aspect of it. But on the seekingintegrity.com site, under the resource tab is a little self-test, and that can be a kind of an indicator. It's not as comprehensive as we do for the assessments of the guys that are coming into treatment, but it can be, a little guideline to kind of figure it out. But here's the deal. I mean, regardless of how much it is, it's still, to me, an intimacy disorder. He cheated on you. Like, if he flat out cheated on you, unless you agreed to these things, which I doubt. So to me, it's like, there's a problem here, and what the label actually is less relevant. It's more, what do you need to do to address those issues? So, hopefully that gives you a little shift, but yeah, I don't believe 100% either. So.
And I would say, Tammy, this is someone who might go see a qualified therapist or ask their spouse to see a qualified therapist and have a meaningful conversation about what's going on. Because having it come up to the room and in the room as organized by somebody like me who knows what they're doing, I think it will be a very different conversation. and they will hear things that you don't hear, my guess is. Oh, by the way, Tammy, someone wrote in how to find this. This is a podcast too, right? We are a podcast, right?
True.
Okay.
Yes, on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, you can find a podcast tab, and there are 3 different podcasts identified on that, and there's different episodes. They're also identified as, for the addict, for the partner, for the couple, so that, you can kind of get an idea of, here's some ones that you may want to consider, kind of where to start. So
Plus, we have a great podcast cover, you and I. I love that.
we do. Yeah.
Okay.
They're all great.
Anyway.
So. Okay, so the
do
next
it.
question is, what changes occur in the sex addict brain after 90 days of sobriety? Any obvious change in the addict's attitude and behavior?
Yeah, I have never liked this idea of magical numbers, which is, if I abstain from sex for 6 months, or if my partner and I don't do this for 30 days, this is a very individual question. I think what works for the person, what works for the couple. For myself, I took 6 months out at one time from any kind of behavior because I wanted to experience myself in the world just without going like this or deciding what I was going to go wear based on it. Did somebody desire me and all that? So, but this whole idea of 90 days, your brain clicks into this, and the brain doesn't work that way. This is an adaptation and evolution. Pieces fall into place at different times for different people. I know people who truly go to program, they see a therapist and they don't act out anymore. I don't know many of them. And then I know people who go to treatment and they're working on it for months and months, and they end up acting out as soon as they leave for home. So I really think it's very individual. And I would really, first of all, I don't trust. And second of all, I don't believe in this concept that at 30 days this happens, or at 90 days that happens, because this behavior is driven by trauma. It's driven by abuse. It's driven by defenses and fears and all that stuff that you spouses don't care about, understandably, because you've been hurt. But for our work, what I can accomplish perhaps as a therapy client and 12-step person in 3 months, it might take someone else 3 years. So in answer to your question, I don't think there are many changes that occur. I think it's a gradual process. And I think in terms of changes in their attitudes and behaviors, as Tammy and I often say, it doesn't take that long if you work at it to get sober, but it takes a really long time to stop being an asshole. Actually, you wouldn't say it that way, Tammy. Narcissism and problematic personality traits are a longer term issue. Having empathy is one of the last things, unfortunately, that happens. I can work with someone who's been sober a year and they're just beginning to figure out how to listen because they've never listened to a partner before. I did write a book for men with this issue called Out of the Doghouse, a relationship saving guide for men caught cheating. And it is because not sex addicted men, but I have never met a man ever anywhere who understands how to heal the wound of infidelity with a woman. We just seem to underestimate it big time. And then we get annoyed when you're still angry at us after 3 months. So that's why I wrote Doghouse. But what I would expect to see is a little bit more closeness, a little bit more availability, a little bit more honesty. I think you'll know in your gut if things are changing or if they're not, Anyway, that's my answer. Tammy?
Yeah, and I'm going to tag onto that. I think the stopping the behavior for 90 days, good, but it's, compared to, it depends how old the person is, compared to lifespan, the wounds, the deeper issues are years and usually decades old. So 90 days is great, but it's just the start. So I think for someone to have 90 days is momentous for the addict, in that I've made it 90 days. We get chips when we go to 12-step meetings, that's all great, but it still is, early in the process, and it really takes a lot longer. It's dealing with all of these things that we work so hard to escape, for years and decades. So having to come to the reality of, like, it's really challenging. There's often, quite frankly, a pink cloud period in early recovery that's 6 or 9 months. So, you're still in the early cusp of that, from that standpoint. And then it's like, oh, because recovery is great. And then it's like, oh, reality is challenging, so, but having the right support, having the right tools to use. I just put the work groups in the chat. So on the seekingintegrity.com site, Dr. Rob mentioned the Out of the Doghouse work or work book. Well, we also have a workbook and a work group. Those are 6-week long live facilitated groups to help, engage with that, go through the homework, be peer support for things. So it's really helpful from the standpoint of, getting that foundation. We have a betrayed partner group starting April 6th. We have sex addiction 101, porn addiction. All of these things are useful tools. None of them are enough alone, but combining all of those things. So if he has just stopped for 90 days, my prognosis or hope would be not good. If he is really actively doing things on a daily basis to change, then be hopeful, cautious, but hopeful. So the next question.
I kind of answered it some.
I know, but you need to answer it so people can hear it.
No, I will. I just wanted to write a little bit because I wanted to use the term. So the question is
it normal to wax and wane your feelings as a spouse that's been betrayed towards the SA husband? Sometimes I don't even want my husband to touch me, and other times I feel like I want to be sexual and close to my husband. I feel like I'm sending mixed messages.
Well, I'm less concerned with the messages you're sending than in how you feel about all of this. And we do have a term which a couple of friends of mine coined called ambivalent love. And I think it is perfectly well described as the idea of looking over at you and I think, oh, you're just the best thing and I just love you and look at you with our kids or whatever. And then an hour later, I see you watching TV and I think you might be watching something, a little sleazy and I freaking hate you and I've always hated you. And so it's this idea of bouncing back and forth between I love you and I really, really am angry at you that makes people crazy. And they think, what's wrong with me that I'm feeling so confused about how I feel? And I think when you've been kind of hit over the head with a bat, it's like you're having, hold on to this, Tammy, an emotional concussion. That's a good one, right?
I like that. I'm writing it down.
It's like you're having an emotional concussion. You've been hit over the head and you're disoriented and you don't know whether this is the right way to, and you're having both feelings at the same time, or at least within short periods. Usually you're feeling really loving towards someone and then maybe they do something a few weeks later and you're mad. It's not like that. It's like loving them and hating them at the same time or within a short period of time. And this is very normal and very typical. You may be sending mixed messages now to the other part of your question, but I think you have to say that to your husband. I am really, well, first, I think a boundary would be good. Like, I'm not going to have sex with you for 30 days or 60 days, so be clear with yourself, because I think it applies with being physical. Like, if I'm sexual with you and then I start to feel those really bad feelings looking at you the next morning, I'm going to feel bad about myself because I'll feel like I betrayed the anger that I'm now feeling the next day. So I think setting a boundary, like, we're not going to be sexual for, a short period of time while I figure all this out, allows you the time to sit back and say, I want to be sexual, but it's probably not a good, to go through all that. And once you set a boundary, I would tell him, obviously that you've set the boundary, but also why, which is you feel like you're giving mixed signals. You really haven't kind of settled down into how you really feel or how to come to terms with this. And I say this over and over again here, and I'm sure Tammy's tired of hearing it, but I say to all of you, why would you be sexual with someone you don't trust? And so if your head and heart, you don't trust this person, even though sometimes you look over them with love, I wouldn't be sexual. And I would tell that truth, which is I'm really ambivalent about how I feel about you right now.
And I actually don't get tired of you saying that. I actually, when I'm talking to people, say, as Dr. Rob often says, so I continue the message. So, okay, next question. At age 54, I'm recently beginning to see the connection between my sexual addiction and my acting out is tied to feelings about myself. I had an off the charts narcissistic father that I booted out of my life 17 years ago. My question is, how much damage can a narcissistic parent cause?
Well, I think they can cause enough damage so that we can become sexually addicted. And I would say, even though they may or may not be aware of it, that probably 80 to 90% of the men I see in treatment have been used by a parent who was either vulnerable or alcoholic. My mother was mentally ill. and they reached out to us as their source of support rather than us being supported by them. And it's called covert incest. Some people call it profound enmeshment. But what it means is that we often don't learn how to take care of ourselves. We look out there for all our validation because that's how we learn to validate ourselves, is by pleasing these big people. So in any case, I think that, by the way, I also think, I don't know what you're doing for your recovery, but I think that it's less important to see the connection and more important to be working on sobriety. So my hope is that you're going to 12-step meetings, you're dropping in some of our groups, which are free, or some of the other places you can go to get support with other people who are in recovery and find your sobriety. Because I've worked with too many people, both as a therapist and people, friends in program, who learned everything about whatever happened to them. And they went to endless therapy and they learned who did this, why mom did that. And it didn't stop them from being out there acting out and lying about it. They just haven't had insight into why. By the way, us addicts, we always want to know why. Why am I like this? Why did I, why? And of course, it's because it's all about us. And we love talking about ourselves. So teach me more about me. I think you have to get some solid sobriety under you, because looking back at the past is anxiety producing, and it brings up all kinds of feelings, and we need to be stable in our sobriety so that we can look at that kind of stuff. But in any case, yes, it is absolutely related. I would say that if you've just recently begun to see the connection, then you have no idea how much damage it can cause. But again, it's different for different people. And it affects, you can grow up in the same family and have very different experiences. My mom used me. She didn't use another sibling. Some people use all, it's just very different. I know families that have 10 kids. Nobody gets much of anything. And that's a whole different set of experiences. So anyway, yes, and work on yourself.
Yeah, and lots of resources. The work groups are a start. We have a treatment program, as Dr. Rob just alluded to. The guys that come to us have underlying issues. It's all of that stuff. So stopping the problematic behavior, but then addressing the underlying wounds, But people call, well, I have trauma. Of course you do. Trauma, abuse, abandonment, neglect, grief, loss. There's something that makes this crazy behavior that we're doing sound like a good idea. So there's help and hope. So, okay, ready for the next one? I'm a sex addict. I have addictions, not chemical, with severe trauma abuse. Do you recommend going cold turkey from all behaviors, or slowly working on stopping each destructive behavior? I notice when I go to get a sponsor or stop all behaviors at once, I go to have a panic attack and feel like I'm going to die, since I've used it all for coping for decades now.
Well, there's a number of questions in there, Tammy, and we haven't done this for a while, but would you mind maybe picking some out and feeding them to me? Because I want to answer as much as I can.
Okay, so the first part is identifying that it's co-occurring, not chemicals, but all the underlying issues that we just talked about. So, but how do you proceed when you've got lots of compulsive behaviors? Do you pick away at the most harmful first? Because
Right.
otherwise it's, causing so much anxiety trying to focus on all of them at once.
Well, the problem is, and you've probably heard people say this before, that working with addiction is like whack-a-mole. You knock down the thing in one spot and then it comes up in the other spot. It's like those old games at places they probably don't have them anymore. But in any case, part of the challenge for some of us is that what's underlying is driving us so powerfully, or with so much emotional energy, that it keeps bubbling up, and then all of a sudden we gain 50 pounds, or we're running to the casino, or gambling the stock market, or working 80 hours a week, or our life is out of balance, and we push our life out of balance because it's more familiar to have a problem out there than to actually look at what's going on inside. So this is, by the way, now is when I will say this is when someone should be in treatment, because I've made a list of why people should come to treatment. Lord knows I know where it is. But one of them is extreme, profound conflict in a coupleship, where you're going to lose something very important if you don't get help now. One of the others is when you try to put down one addiction and the other one comes up and you can't really get sober, no matter how hard you try, because you keep going round and round. That is also, I think, a reason to be in a safe environment so that you can put them all down and deal with the panic. When you are being observed and supported by people 24/7, unless you have a psychiatric issue, which I'll mention in a moment, You're going to have to sit there and work through it. You're going to have to cry and yell and do whatever you need to do in your panic, and we'll all hold you until it's over, emotionally hold you. And then you'll learn that you can get through that without acting out. But sometimes it takes meaningful experience of putting it all down and getting a lot of support in its place. The thing about panic attacks, what I usually hear from people is when they go cold turkey and they're not chemical addicts, they get overwhelmed emotionally, they really struggle, they get depressed, they feel all this longing and emptiness. But panic attacks is strong, and feeling like I'm going to die, that's a very strong statement. So if that were me, I would be in a psychiatrist's office saying, I have a bunch of compulsive behaviors and, I'm working on those. But the problem is when you can say, you don't have to say sex, because Lord knows they don't understand that, but you can say food and gambling or whatever, and then say, I think underlying that is some depression or some anxiety or something I don't understand, because when I put them down, I get extremely anxious and overwhelmed. That, by the way, that's counterintuitive to healing, because if you put them down and then you go into panic, I would rather use than be in a panic all the time. So it sounds like you need more help than you're getting. And I think a medical professional in this case. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
A qualified, and you mentioned it, say, I have these compulsive behaviors. You want somebody who understands addiction, because not all of the psychiatric professionals do. So you really do. So when guys come to a seeking integrity treatment program, not everybody needs to have an evaluation, but some of them do benefit for that, because they do have some underlying, clinical depression or clinical anxiety, OCD, ADHD, something. So then, scheduling an appointment with that particular professional who really understands addiction, as well as those, to get on sometimes, a time release medication that, supports, okay, now they're okay, so that they can deal with, the emotional stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I was thinking too, Dr. David Fawcett, who has a webinar on Wednesdays, he's a team member at Seeking Integrity Treatment Program, but he talks about why we, are a non-smoke, non-vape facility, because, continuing to keep that dopamine going, you're doing the whack-a-mole that Dr. Rob was talking about. You never get any kind of level of freedom from the behaviors. You're just using a different one. I've used the analogy, the garbage can addiction of like, well, I can't do that one, so I'm going to do this one. It's whatever is handy at the moment to soothe, still not addressing those underlying wounds. So you also alluded decades old now. So I would invite you to get the level of help that's going to help you, so that you don't have to, for the next bunch of decades, struggle with the same issues. Okay, ready? Next one. Would you please elaborate on why you do not believe that love addicts in recovery can ever choose a healthy partner or be chosen by a healthy partner?
Okay, well, I think this goes beyond love addiction. I think all of us choose people at a very similar level of emotional functioning as us. Does that mean that I have to get involved with an addict? No. Does that have to mean I have to get involved with someone who is OCD? No. It isn't specific. It's just that I'm vulnerable in certain ways, and that means and I really want to hear this, okay? Hear this. I'm vulnerable in certain ways because I'm a human being, period, end of sentence. As a human being who's vulnerable in some ways, I do really well when I find someone or get involved with someone who has similar vulnerabilities, or even better, they're strong where I'm vulnerable and I'm strong where they're vulnerable. So the real answer to your question is, I actually think with all of my heart that two troubled people together have the best opportunity for the highest level of healing than one person does by themselves. And to you single people, I say, you're going to get well, you're going to work hard, you're going to have to work harder to build community, because there won't be anyone around you at home at night. But I really, this sort of smacks of codependency to me when people say, if I get healthier, I'm going to choose healthier people. And what's wrong with choosing the people you choose? And, dealing with the brokenness that's in front of you. And so, there's a lot about this in codependence. And I completely rewrote this, Tammy, by the way, about 6s and 7s, and because it wasn't quite right. I do think, and to all of you partners, you have issues. They may not be the same issues. They may not be to the same degree as the addict, but we all have issues. Did you marry us or get involved with us because some of those issues lined up with ours? You bet. Is that a bad thing? No. If we get sober and put our lives on track, we are going to be the best couple in the world because we are working together to become stronger. And so that's how Dr. Rob looks at it. You're going to find people who are messed up, and you know what? You're going to discover, if you haven't already, that we're all a little messed up. But when we find each other and we have a commitment to growth, this is why I say to a lot of love addicts, um, date whoever you want, but make sure you have a list of, they can't be actively using drugs. They can't be living with their ex-wife. They can't be they need to have a job and an apartment and a car. I'm not going to date anyone that I don't run it by people who love me. And if you want to date someone and you don't want them to meet your family and you don't want them to meet your friends, that's a bad sign, because those people know that you're healthy family. They know your good choices better than anyone else. So it's not that I don't believe you will ever find a healthy partner in recovery. I think that none of us will find the healthy partner. Um, I could go on and on about this, Tammy. As you know, I have all kinds of things I want to say, but I'm going to say read Prodependence. There's a new version coming out over the summer, and there's a whole section on why challenged people get involved with challenged people. I really don't want you spouses thinking, well, that's the addict, and you said I don't have a part in their addiction being codependent, so how come you're saying I have issues? These are different things. You do not make someone act out. You do not make somebody an alcoholic. You do not create escalation in their behavior. That's their problem. But do you both probably have issues that you share and need to work on? Absolutely. And did you find just the right person to do that with? Absolutely.
Which
Ooh,
is
that
called
was
a healthy relationship. And I wrote it
or
down.
codependent.
We're gonna do a podcast on that. Okay, next questions, and I'm going to summarize the two. I'm a male addict in recovery for 13 months, had one relapse and some slips, has been doing a lot of work for recovery. How much detail he has a partner, how much detail should I give all this work? Should I share everything or keep some things to myself and between my therapist? As fellows in recovery, I feel like I should share everything to be vulnerable and open as possible, but I've had some professional advice otherwise. Any advice would be appreciated.
There's more.
That was the continued. There's two of them.
Oh, that was the continuation. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
I
So,
summarized because it listed like everything itemized, so I was shortening it.
well, I
So
appreciate that you work a 12-step program, because I don't think it's just you and your therapist. I think you need to share everything with your sponsor. I'm not dropping that on folks who've never been to a 12-step meeting, and you don't have to go out and find a sponsor if that's not what you want to do. But if you are in a recovery program, it isn't just the person who is counseling you, it's also that person who you work with and are working the steps with that you really, really need to be very clear about when you're struggling. As far as a spouse, here is my bottom line. The inner circle, which is your bottom line sobriety, it is a sexual act. I touched myself. I went somewhere. I touched somebody else. The acts that involve sex are your inner circle, I would imagine, the unhealthy ones. If you cross one of those lines, you have broken your sobriety. If you break your sobriety, you absolutely need to go to your spouse so that they know what is going on with you. They will not be happy. They may want to leave you. They may be furious. It's not going to be a good night. But the spouse who stays is going to realize, oh, something is new here. They may be acting out, but I know about it. There's not a secret. They're not afraid to tell me. And that actually is progress. We prefer not acting out, but if that were to happen, you got to tell your spouse. I can't imagine a spouse, you're coming back from a meeting and saying, hey, I just got a chip for 6 months of going to 12-step meetings. And your spouse said, but I thought you were sober for a year. That would be a very, very bad situation. Now, I understand that spouses want to hear everything about everything, and they want to know every single moment that went on, because that's what makes them feel safe, and they are seeking safety. The reality is, if we had to answer every single question every single moment, we would all lose our minds. And what I say to spouses is, write your questions down. Not when I'm like cleaning this and working on that. It's a good time to say how many prostitutes. It's just not a good time. It's not, your questions don't need to be answered, but all day long is a problem. So share slips with your partner. Make sure that what is in your inner circle is sexual behavior. I know that you spouses would like, God, I'm pushing the spouses back a little bit today. But you know what? I've done this a long time. I'm not an angry spouse. I actually have information that doesn't come from that emotional place. So I think it's easier, Tammy, for me to say these things than maybe for some folks to hear it. But thinking back on it over time, you spouses will realize you do not want to be the parole officer of the person you love. You do not want to be policing them, because it's not going to make you feel safer. What will make you feel safer is when we come to you and we are honest, and you can begin to depend on our honesty. Tammy and I were just working on a description of what would help a betrayed spouse feel good about some of the work that we do. What would make them feel like this is the right situation for me? And I had to put the word honesty in, because we agreed that is what spouses want. They want honesty, they want intimacy. When I hear from them, 10% is about sex and 90% is about how crap our relationship was. Um, in any case, I know spouses aren't going to want to hear this before I stop, but things that are intangible, like lies, don't go in the inner circle. I'm going to lie. I might straight up lie to you about having taken the garbage out when I didn't do it, and then I run and take it out. But if I had to reset my sexual sobriety, if Tammy had to reset alcohol sobriety every time she lied to someone, she would never have 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 years of recovery. She'd have to, I know you never lie, Tammy, but maybe once in a while. So can you comment on this too? That would be really helpful.
But is it lies of omission? Is it lies of commission? Yeah, like I get the heebie-jeebies when I hear about, having lies. I want to comment back on the original question, which is, should I tell everything? No, there's a check-in process. There's a plan. You don't have to figure this all out. I put it in the chat. Fanos, Fanos, check-in. Google it. I put a link in. If you're joining us live, you can click on it. It gives you, and you both check in. It isn't just like, oh, I'm reporting, okay, I've been a good boy, I did this, or girl, whatever. It's like, this is how you check in. It's how you communicate in a healthy and meaningful way. But I agree with Dr. Rob. Tell your sponsor everything. Tell your therapist everything. Tell your partner the stuff that's going to help you grow as a couple. Listen to what your partner says at check-in too. There's a thought. It's not just all about me. It's about both of us. So I think that, that's how you can help the relationship and be accountable to grow. So
That was our imperfect answer.
Okay. So the next question, I've been married for over 30 years and the second D-Day was almost a year ago. The previous D-Day was 9 years before that. This time my husband is going through the 12-step program and I believe he finally gets it. In his own words, to describe his addiction as nothing less than insanity. He's getting it. We are sleeping in separate bedrooms and the thought of him seeing me without clothes on gives me great anxiety. I'm sorry. By the way, he has also been reading out of the Doghouse book and is amazed by how much it hits home. Going back to the join the work group for that particular one, but yeah, I'm so sorry that it's traumatizing for you to even consider him seeing you that way and vulnerable. So,
well, I think that is trauma. The idea that, oh, this person looked at so many other people and now they're looking at me and I feel like I've been slimed, or I feel like, if you don't feel safe with this person, and especially if you've had some issues in the past about betrayal, or I can imagine it's going to send a shiver up your spine when you think, oh, they're going to want to be sexual with me, or they're going to want to even get close to me. I do think that might be something to work on a little bit with other people in your recovery. I would want you to be talking to other, I don't know your gender. Oh, it's probably spouse. I know we don't know we actually don't know, but
let's assume female just for the sake of
okay.
Yeah, because
I think this
so.
is a really good thing to take to couples therapy, to other spouses, and say, I bet if we did a little poll, there'd be a number of spouses who said right here now, I don't feel comfortable when I am coming out of the shower and he walks in. I don't feel comfortable after everything has happened. I don't think you're alone. I do encourage you to dig in with other people who can understand this and who've been through this, whether the free groups or, Tammy can direct you. By the way, that is TAMI at seekingintegrity.com. And the reason I give Tammy's information is because some of you are looking for therapists, some of you are looking for some of the workshops, some of you, Tammy is does not want to take a lot of phone calls because she will never get off the phone, but she's really into email, and
Yeah.
she will respond to
Well,
everyone and everything.
that said, on our website, it says if you're calling for treatment. So those that are calling and really inquiring about our residential treatment program, I'm happy to, that's a bigger commitment. I'm happy to answer any questions
Well,
about
Tammy, that's how
that.
you
So
get paid.
that's how
Everything
we
else
all
we give
get
away
paid.
for
That's we
free.
give. Yeah. It's not, but I'm going to qualify that even with that. There are people that aren't a fit for our program. We turn people away. It is not just about filling beds. We're seeking integrity. I value that. We are seeking it personally. We want to help the client seek that. We do not, we are not just about filling beds. If we can help you, we want to help you. If we're not
Well,
the right fit, then we want to help you find the right fit. So,
and I'm not very good at this part, but I will say this, one of the reasons we're able to give away our time and podcasts and get these people to volunteer for us and set up all these websites and all of that, and is because we teach classes and we run treatment, and that allows us to make a salary, make a living, and also do all of the other stuff we do for free. So when you hear us talking about work groups in the treatment center, we're not really trying to sell you anything. I think it's more about resources. We want to make you aware.
absolutely, yeah, like you can't do this on your own. And for those, and we hear this, he thinks he can do it on his own. He won't succeed. And you poor betrayed partner, I'm sorry, and you shouldn't have to struggle on your own. Like, there are resources, tons of free stuff, low cost. A 6-week work group is $350 for 90 minutes every week, live facilitated. That's a fantastic value to get a foundation of psychoeducation that you're not going to get, in your therapist's office. And therapists probably charge more than the $60-ish that is. It's great information and support. But when we hear, and we hear all the time, life changing from the clients who have been with us. We got a great email, and I won't get it right. But we got an email from a partner. She said it was along these lines. It was like, I don't know what you did with the guy that I sent, but you can keep him. I love this guy the guy that you sent back.
The one that came back.
Yeah, is great. But you can keep the other one. And I was like, it was a humorous take, but it's profound. That's what we're working to do, is provide people with an opportunity to do life differently. The person that mentioned, I've been doing this for decades, we all did, until we got help and qualified help to be able to not keep doing the same insane thing. So there is help, and people keep putting things. If you put a question in the chat, we're not going to answer it. If you put it in the Q&A, we will do our best. I think we're going to run out of time, but we'll try. So, okay, next question. Can you speak to whether or not there's a physiological need for a man to have sex to ejaculate semen? I'm a betrayed partner. My husband says celibacy isn't normal, and as an excuse to watch porn since we don't have a physical relationship. This is one of those BS.
Well, here's a good one. Tell your husband that you spoke with someone who has a PhD in clinical sexology. I spent almost 5 years studying what is sex, what is it about, how do the parts work, all those issues. So I can say with clarity that men have this thing called nocturnal emissions. When you're a 15-year-old or 13-year-old, you may have a nocturnal emission and not even know what that is. In other words, we will ejaculate in our sleep. The body takes care of itself. So if the body had a need to refresh itself or release semen or whatever, it would happen. It would happen during his sleep. His body will take care of itself. So is celibacy not normal? I don't know. I think there are many people that they just had a baby, they take time out, someone passed away. There are times when we just stop or don't feel like being sexual. Is that not normal? Sometimes I say I had a really bad relationship and I don't want to be sexual for a while because it brings back memories, or I'm not ready, or why would that not be normal? What does normal even have to do with it? The question is celibacy healthy for some people, and there's nothing unhealthy about it. I'd be more concerned about your husband's desire to tell you how important it is that he watch porn. I've said to many men, it's not going to fall off. It's not going to, you're not going to be in pain. It's not going to back up like a drain. You'll be fine. Your body will take care of itself.
But
That was
that's,
funny, Tammy. I
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
but yeah, that is totally one of those where, yeah, he's lying to himself and you. So don't believe him. Glad you're here. Okay. Next question. I am a sex addict and have been celibate since last August, but 3 weeks ago, my wife asked for a divorce following my formal therapeutic disclosure. In the last week, I have started to masturbate and watch videos, not porn, about women dancing. That's still problematic. I feel I can ruin all my hard work of the last 12 months in a flash. I want to stay in my recovery as a single man until I can control my addiction better. I know I will be in recovery the rest of my life. Any recommendations to move forward and how to meet my healthy needs?
Well, if I were Tammy, I would say I don't see anything about 12-step programs. I don't see anything about groups.
Yep.
I don't see anything about therapy. Is that what Tammy would say?
Well, I was so first of all, if you figure out how to control your addiction, please write to me, because
Make a lot of
I have,
money.
that would be very unique. I have no control over my addiction. I have control over my recovery. So that's really how I see it. And I'm really sorry that you chose clearly, behavior that's problematic, but also I hear some shame in there that I've ruined things. Well, today's a new day. You can choose differently. You're here, good. But yeah, like leaning into, there's 12-step, like you could be on a 12-step meeting, 24/7. I don't recommend that, but rather than doing that, we had a guy that said, every time I feel like relapsing, I listen to one of your podcasts. I was like, great, watch one of these videos. Trust me, that won't be, that's anyway, I won't go there. There's other choices, but you can start today. You cannot do those same behaviors as of today. And then the next day you do the same thing. You just don't do that. And then you lean into the recovery resources rather than using your wife is divorcing you. And we all have life crap, pardon my language, but we all have life crap. Some of it's worse than others. Recovery is how we learn to do life differently, not because all of a sudden it got magically better, but we learn to have tools and support to do life differently. So shit happens. Exactly. Yeah.
I wanted to actually say something about this.
Please.
So over the years, I've learned something which might be useful for you. Not for you.
I'm sorry.
I used to think I wanted to act out, and that was it. I went and acted out. And then I used to think, oh, I got to call somebody, I got to do something. And then I would do that, in the different stages of recovery. First, I just did it. Then I started asking for help. But now I understand, and I think this is the most important piece, not that I don't do something about it, but my acting out is just like a pull on my sleeve that says I'm needful or I'm lonely, or it's like having an inner child, that concept. It's like the kid is saying, pay attention to me or do something for me, or I'm scared because this person I've lived with is going away. And it's like, and I've said this before, it's like we say to that kid, shut up, I don't have time for you. And we go and act out because that's the emotional part of ourselves that we don't want to have to deal with. So if you are struggling, you need more people around. It means you're lonely. It means you're, there's a reason why you said my wife wanted a divorce and then I started back with my behavior. I don't think that's very hard to look at the connection with. You're having a lot of feelings about it. Who you're sharing them with? Whose support do you have? Who are you crying with? Who is encouraging you to move forward, and how you're going to move forward? I think all of that. And maybe I wouldn't be. By the way, it's interesting because, again, we don't know about 12-step programs. I really hope you're in one, because what you said was, last week I've started to master and watch videos, not porn, about a woman dancing. I feel I can ruin all my hard work. You shouldn't be making those decisions. You should have a sponsor to go to and say, I looked at this. What does this mean? Where do I need to take it? How can I stay out of trouble? You shouldn't have to be worried about if you ruining or not ruining, or that's not your that's none of your business. That's why we have people around us to tell us, you're really struggling with that. I think you're doing fine. Or, By the way, you're not looking at hardcore porn every night for 3 hours. Let me well, I'll say one more thing, Tammy. I used to work at a very expensive treatment center. I worked at lots of treatment centers, and and I used to say to the owner, I said, how can you charge this much money for treatment? I mean, because a lot of people leave and they go back to their using and all that. And he said, well, you know what? Treatment doesn't always stop people from using, but every time they go, if they have to go more than once, they use less. They know more and they know more, and they're less likely to use. The research says, they drank this much, now they're maybe drinking less because they're still drinking and they're still a drunk, but they're not doing what they were doing before. And this is especially true for us. So think about where you were before, and now you're watching some videos about women dancing. I'm not saying that's a good idea for you, but it's a whole lot better than where you were. Now put a foundation under it so that you don't slip down further. And by the way, the single man thing just makes me think, someone's thinking about dating, someone's thinking, there's something about being a single man that struck me. And I thought, you are not ready. Don't even think about it. You're struggling both emotionally and with your recovery. You're not grounded, and you're probably longing for connection, and you're probably missing her. This is not the time to date anybody. Just wanted to put that out there. Tammy, you felt that vibe too?
Yes, no, I agree with that because yeah, I was like 3 weeks. Okay, I should be watching. And here's the other thing. I felt the lonely of like I'm watching a video about a woman dancing. Like that's sad to me. And you could be. So what I learned early in recovery is instead of focusing on me, be of service to others. How can I be of service to someone else? How can I be helpful? And when I got out of myself, I was in a much better place. So I would invite you to think about how can you positively impact someone else's life. But also like the grieving is real. Grieving is real. So, Sophia Caudle has on in the rooms, she's got some grief groups free on intherooms.com. But she also did a podcast with Dr. Rob on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. Under the podcast, you'll find a podcast about grief. It's real. It's a process. And then one more, and it was for betrayed partners, but I think you would still find it really useful. Was there's a series of 2 grieving webinars that Debbie McRae did recently, just in the last month or so, on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. You'll find those under the resource tab and previously recorded. And yes, you can email me, Tammy, TAMI at Seeking Integrity. Ask me specifically what you're looking for. Don't say you said something on the webinar last night. I'll go, I don't remember. So, but it's a process, and just understand that it's a process and there are stages, and it's okay. It is survivable, and thrivable. We can learn to do things differently. We can be in a very different place. So I would invite you to step into and lean into recovery and your recovery resources. So.
And I want to add that you can't ruin all the hard work the last 12 months, not in a flash, not ever, because whatever work you did, it's a healing part of you and you grew. So, even if you give the whole thing up today, you're still a better person than you were when you started. So you don't ruin anything. You may stumble, you may fall in a hole once in a while, but we don't ruin things. We just get back up and go back to work.
So the next question is, how can I bring up the subject of sex addiction with my spouse? So if somebody is completely in the dark and they haven't had discovery, how do you even talk about it?
Boy, you know what I would love, Tammy, and this is one of the few times I'm going to do this. For you spouses who are here, I would love, not all of you, but a couple of you to write in the chat and say, if I had the choice of hearing this from my spouse, this is how I would have wanted to hear it, or this is what I wanted him or her to do. This person is saying, as Tammy, or we're going to interpret it like this, that these people are married, and he is a heterosexual couple, and he is saying, I know I'm a sex addict. I know I have these issues. My wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, they don't know anything. How do I begin to talk about it with them? And so what I'm asking you folks is to jump in the chat and say, if you were with someone and you knew nothing about what they were doing, what would you want them to say to you? How would you want them to approach you? Because I would love to hear some of that feedback. I can make stuff up, but I'd love to hear how you think of that. And if you had not found it, but someone loving had come to you and helped you understand it, What would they have said? Where would they have done it? My first response to this is go see a therapist who knows what they're doing, because what I don't want to see is you going to your spouse and throwing up all over them, and that, by the way, I can tell you what to not do. Don't sit down with your spouse one night and say, I have a few things to tell you, and then just, tell them even half of what you know, because what support do they have? Who are they going to call? Where's their therapist? You just, as nice as it would be to get it off our shoulders. And by the way, some of us addicts, I've had one guy say, I don't understand. My wife kept asking me what was going on, and I finally told her, and she didn't seem particularly happy that I told her. That's how narcissistic he was. He wasn't thinking of how it would actually make her feel. So I love that you're asking this questions. Ooh, here's an answer.
We've got
Someone
some.
said,
Yeah. I would love to
good.
hear about it in the presence of a therapist instead of discovering it. Then the next one was, tell me you need to talk to me about something serious, what you're dealing with, and how you are planning, and how you're planning to do about it. So what you're planning to do about it. I would have liked it if he had already started therapy and then invited me to a session and told me he was struggling with. I would have loved it if my husband had sat down, looked me in the eye, and shared what was going on to me, what he was doing to get well and commit to change and recovery. The need to explain what sex addiction is. So that was a great idea, Dr. Rob. Thank you all for taking a moment and sharing, with us too.
And
But what I hear the consistent piece is the honesty and have a supportive environment, not just, you never do this in the car when someone is trapped. I hear about that too, where they're the passenger in the car and they're stuck, like, so.
don't do it on vacation either, just a
Oh, that's a good
suggestion.
one too. Yeah.
But I did hear two themes in there that I wanted to mention. One of them was do it with a therapist. I heard that. I also heard really clearly, have a plan. Like, I don't just want to hear about the problem. I want to hear what you're going to do about it. And I think that I haven't actually thought about that before, but of course, I'm going to hate what you're telling me, but it will give me some hope and some relief to know that you've looked into it, you've learned about it. I have to tell you guys, Tammy knows this. She sets them up. I do these consultations. I see people for about 2 hours. I work with couples and try to help them really figure out what are your next steps and how to go forward. And, inevitably this question comes up. I hate being older and forgetting things. I lost my question. Hold on a second.
How do I bring up the subject of sex addiction to my spouse? That was what we're talking about.
I'll have to go back to that. I wrote something about the couples consultations. It will come back to me. Yeah, let's go forward. And
I wouldn't do that one. I don't think I would say, I need you to come on an expert consultation with Dr. Rob Weiss.
Oh, I know what I was going to say.
I wouldn't do it that way. So
when I do expert consultations and I sit down in front of a couple, and it's usually the guy's been acting out. Tammy, you haven't heard these. I love this. I say to him, have you been working on this? Oh, yes, I've been working on this. What have you been doing? I've been doing this and that and the other thing. And, I'm really committed to change, he'll say. And then I say to his wife, who found out about me? Oh, well, I did, the spouse says. Well, has either of you listened to the podcast? The spouse says, yeah, actually, I've listened to a bunch of them. I made him listen to some. Have you read any of the books? Well, the spouse says, well, I bought some books and I gave them to him. And then my favorite one is, who made the appointment for this consultation? And guess what? It's the spouse. So, if you want to make a plan and give your spouse support for having a plan out of your problem, don't make them look things up, find things, get online, do it yourself. So you can go to them and say, this is the groups I'm going to, these are the meetings give them some sense that it's meaningful to you and you're not just accommodating them and expect them to do all the work, because that makes them crazy.
So we got more clarification. That was a great answer, but the question, I interpreted the question incorrectly. This is actually from a partner. I'm a gay man in a marriage. I discovered my spouse was cheating and fits 90% of the SA addiction profile. He doesn't realize he's an addict. How do I talk to him about it in counseling? So
I wrote a book called Cruise Control, Understanding Gay Men and Sex Addiction. No, Understanding Sex Addiction in Gay Men. I think I'm the only person who has written, and it's been revised. I am the only person that I know of, or it's the only book that I know of, Tammy can take a look and find out, for gay men who are sex addicts. Buy the book, give him the book, tell him that you really have some thoughts about the relationship and you've been reading this, and it would be I'm trying to look for the right words. It would be, because I want to say not nice or not like it's essential for our relationship that you should take some time and read this.
Mhm.
I would make it really important. But I think, you know, when you read that book, it's very clear what a problem is and what a problem isn't. And in the gay community, because there's so much more casual sex, it's kind of like being an alcoholic in a bar. You know, everybody's drinking, so you don't know if you were drunk. I wrote the book to differentiate what healthy gay life might be, as opposed to someone who's a sex addict in that world. So give it to him, throw it at him,
Well,
do it.
and this would be one of those where then I do recommend an expert consultation with Dr. Rob. Like when you flip it the other
Right.
way, this is actually where it's super handy to have Dr. Rob listening to the issues and helping to identify the issues and guiding next steps. You know, and I think he can bring a level of awareness to people of, you know, like it sounds like a problematic behavior, intimacy disorder, however it comes around. So to consider it's a 2-hour one-time expert consultation. You can reach out to me at Tammy, Tami, at seekingintegrity.com. I can give you more information, but that can be really helpful in having some clarity. Don't you think, Dr.
Clarity.
Rob? Yeah. Okay.
Well, that I really do think that experience is a tremendous gift. And I learned early in life, assessment is my best skill. What does mom look like? What does mom need? You know, I learned really early. And I think I know that having that objectivity, people have really, well, you've heard them, they say that they have clarity that they've never had before.
Yeah.
And that is a gift from me, to feel good about what life has taught me to give. So yeah, I like doing the consultation.
I have used
And
that discernment in identifying these issues is among your superpowers. So, you know,
discernment,
yeah, no, I
good
really do.
word.
I believe that, you know, and given the information and hearing from both people, I think you excel at that. So,
I'm a
among
good
other
mental health
things.
clinician.
So, yeah. Okay. So, next question. How do you know when to start believing the addict about their dedication to not acting out? How do you know when you can begin to trust again? I don't want to have have to have her polygraph her or search through her phone and accounts. I don't want to live like that. If she wants to lie, she'll just get better at it over time. If gets a sponsor, she'll lie to them if she needs to. When I caught her cheating the second time, she was lying to everyone, including her best friend and her therapist, in order to justify her behaviors. How does one know when the truth is the truth with someone who is just has a pattern of lying? Great question, and the challenge for all partners.
And I really appreciate that, that this is not a heterosexual couple dealing with this. I really appreciate that, because everybody struggles with these issues. So Tammy, this is probably the fear of every spouse, the concern of every spouse, everyone here, whatever your orientation or interest is. Where do you start? Because everyone asks Tammy this question when they call.
Yeah, and how do you know when you can start trusting again? And I think the actions and attitude really start to shift. And yes, someone truly dedicated to their addiction can just get sneakier at it. But I think trust your gut, get support, you know, and if you start seeing someone showing up differently, like they're starting their actions, it's really all about their actions. It's not just checking off, you know, going to your 12-step, going to your therapist. And yes, I think the record right now that I have is 11 years of lying to a therapist, 11 years of going to a therapist. What's the point, you know? But trust your gut that if this person if you feel like, oh, I think they're still, you know, cheating and sneaking, I would believe that. If you start seeing them show up in real and meaningful ways, you know, start trusting in little bits. You'll never trust the same as when you naively thought that this person completely had your back. I think doing the Thanos check-in that I posted in the chat earlier, I think that's a good start. You know, checking in and seeing what's going on. Dr. Rob talked about the acting out, it's really more a signal of, am I lonely? Am I hurting, in some other way? So, but a person in recovery, I think, and people that have been in recovery and then they start to slip, their partners will go, I noticed a difference. And so I think, on some level, whether your heart and your head actually can align and believe it is another thing. So,
Well, Tammy, I really always appreciate your counsel. And this is a tough question because it's a painful question. The first thing I have to say that occurred to me is, you can start believing them when they stop talking about how great they're doing. When you say, how do you know to start believing the addict about how dedicated they are? I don't think they should be telling you that. They should be showing you that. If I say to you, oh, I'm doing so great in my program, I did this and I did that, I would feel like, what does your need to tell me all that? Why don't you it's like, I just want to know what the plan is. I don't want to hear how well you're doing, how great you're trying, or I don't want to validate. By the way, it's not your job, should this person be seeking validation from you, to validate them. They hurt you. So if they're coming around saying, well, I've been doing this for 3 months and 6 months of that, and I've got a new sponsor, not your job to cheer for them. They hurt you. Maybe it's other people's jobs to cheer for them. I don't hear in this what you're doing for yourself. I hear a focus on, what if she does this and what if she does that, and how do I handle this and can I trust that? And she's going to lie to the sponsor. And you've put a lot of thought and you've had a lot of crappy experience in what this person does or doesn't do and how they do it. I would love to see you writing at least half of this as, because I don't trust and I'm not sure, I've been going to this group, I've been seeing a therapist, I've been making sure to get my head straight, I've been putting less focus on what they are and what they're not doing, and more focus on my having fun in the world and getting away from this as a focus of my life. And I mean this with all due respect. I think that to me, this reads like someone who's fairly early in the process and has not had enough guidance. It makes me sad to think, I guess I was trying to think about what makes me sad about it. It feels hopeless. Like, what's the point? They're going to keep lying anyway. And, if you feel that way, I think you should notice that you feel that way. Tammy's saying about trust your gut. I wrote down, I think some of you had heard me say, I was running group therapy once, and I had someone in group who said, someone in the group was saying, I don't know whether to do this or not. And I keep driving myself crazy. Should I, shouldn't I, should I? And this wonderful person who was in my group said, when I'm just going to go do something and I don't, I just do it. I go to do my laundry, I go do it. Going to the store, I just go buy. But when I find myself saying, I wonder if I should do that or not, something is there that I need to pay attention to. And often it's the wrong decision. So when you are asking this question, and because you're asking us this question, I think you already know that you don't feel safe and you're not entirely trusting. And I don't hear that there's a therapist involved in this situation for you. If she wants to lie, she gets a sponsor, she'll just lie to them if she needs to. When I caught her, she was lying. Her therapist, her best friend. Do you hear the pattern here? I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just saying what I want to hear is me, and my support. And then you will have the answers to your questions.
And we are out of time. And I have a phone call from someone looking for treatment. It's coming in right now. So I'm going to leave. Bye, everybody.
Y'all have a good night.
Thank you.